Hello and welcome back to the Blackwood PTS again. We're going to be looking at the new heavy armor set from the Rock Grove trial, the Champion set. And this looks like a pretty interesting set that is most likely going to be used. Now, we've got to remember that this is week 1 of the PTS, and we've seen nerfs in the past to good looking heavy armor tank sets, so I'm kind of trying to reserve my excitement of having a new heavy armor set until this actually goes live. So last patch we had Drake's Rush. There was a 12-person set, and then we saw that get nerfed. And although it's still quite good for some stuff, it's not quite the same as what it would have been. Now with this particular set, interesting choices that have been made here. So we've got the two items is Max Magicka, 1096 Max Magicka, which you don't often see on a tank set. We've got the kind of standard minor Aegis, which we get on pretty much every heavy armor trial set that becomes available. The 4 items and the perfected 5-item piece is an extra 1096 max stamina as well, which is great to have. And then the standard 5-piece is when you cast an ultimate ability, you and up to 11 group members within 28 meters of you gain major force for 21 seconds, increasing your critical damage done by 20%, and this effect can occur once every 30 seconds. Now the big question is why would we use this in the first place? Now, the reason why would be so that we don't have to use Warhorn anymore. So while you might still have somebody using the Warhorn for the extra max stats, generally this means you don't essentially need to use Warhorn. So there are many different ways we can kind of think about setting this up. So you could set this up where maybe your healers would run Destro ultimates, for example, so they can do more damage. Or maybe you'll set up with a more defensive structure now, where you're using barriers and novas and things like that instead, and you're playing defensive, but you're still getting the benefit of the major force while using a barrier, or using barriers within your group and things like that. Now it is possible to maintain this set with a 100% uptime, or should I say 98% uptime. So we can get this set to cast every 29.4 seconds, and it's got a 30-second cooldown. So we can virtually cast this with a 0.6 second downtime. And the way obviously we do that is by combining it with Jorvald's Guidance. So this will buff major buffs, minor buffs, and damage shields applied to yourself and allies by 40%. And this is providing a major buff with major force. So we can get this to be 29.4 seconds. Now this isn't, I'm not saying that this is going to be the setup that you would use, but this is just a way of maintaining it with 100% uptime. Now to proc the set, you don't need to use a Warhorn, you use whatever ultimate you want. It's any ultimate, when you cast an ultimate ability. So what this means, for example, is you can choose the cheapest cost ultimate you can find. So if we're on a Dragon Knight, our cheapest cost ultimate is Take Flight, 110 ultimate. All classes have access to Shield Discipline, which is 124 ultimate. There's a lot of different classes like the Templar, the Nightblade, and the Warden that have all got very, very cheap ultimate skills as well. We have also got to consider the Necro. The Necromancer is very good at generating ultimates. So a Necromancer tank, or maybe even a Necromancer healer, they are very good at generating ultimate because they have skills there, they have the ability to absorb corpses and generate ultimate. But this means you can also combine both the Colossus and this set to basically provide a Warhorn and a Colossus with the same ultimate. So that is another thing to consider as well, is the fact you can use one ultimate for basically the same as 2 ultimates by doing that. Now one of the things that I'm kind of unsure about is there was no developer comments about this particular set. I would like to kind of understand what the thought process is behind this sort of gear set, because obviously Warhorn has been a skill that has been used since the start of time, and that is a skill that supports have used for such a long time now. What was the reason why they decided that they were going to bring a major force gear set into the game that you can basically run at 100% uptime with one player? How was that process, how was that conclusion reached, and what was their thoughts behind it? Now, one of the things that I can think of personally, maybe they want to try and separate more between PvP and PvE. So they've brought out PvP monster sets with this patch as well, which are obtained within PvP. They are PvP orientated monster sets that you get in PvP content. Which I really like the idea of them doing that and kind of making it possible for PvP players to earn gear that is actually quite useful for them without having to do PvE content. Because PvP players want to do PvP content. So it makes sense to have monster sets available in PvP areas for them to obtain, and that's a great change. Have they done the same with this set? Is this one of the processes where they're trying to make it so that you don't have to go and grind out Warhorn as a skill to get it to be able to competitively do PvE content as a player? And is that why this set has come into effect? Is an option to get that buff without having to do PvP, and meaning that a lot of players might now have access to doing more PvE content and be more useful to their group so that they don't have to worry about getting that skill. Another thing is the fact that obviously when doing things like trials, when you're trying to maximize your Warhorn uptime, it's quite difficult to manage it between 4 people. You've got to manage the ultimate gain of 4 people. You've got to be casting them in sync with each other so that you cast in one and then the next one and then the next one. By using this skill, you kind of avoid the need to do that. You can just have one person in charge of Major Force. You could still have somebody else using a Warhorn for the max stats, or maybe not even the aggressive horn morph. They could use a different morph or the unmorphed version just for the max stats. And then you've got just one person to rely on for Major Force, which in a way could potentially be better, is that you just have to worry about one person controlling it. And that is kind of a good thing potentially for some groups. Now in terms of like group composition and stuff, this does maybe pose some big changes to a group, and it's going to, like I say, it's going to vary heavily. There's still a lot to happen. We haven't even seen the end of the PTS yet, so this set could get changed. If anything, I could see the set potentially being nerfed a little bit with the time, so the time being reduced potentially. I could see that happening. I don't think that the range would get nerfed or anything like that. I think potentially by the end of the PTS, I'd be surprised if this doesn't get adjusted and the time duration of the Major Force gets reduced, just so that when you use it with Jorvald's guidance, you don't get 100% uptime, basically. Now, if you were an off-tank, this does seem to fit well with a potential Necro off-tank. What it would mean, though, is if you are just having one person in control of Major Force with Jorvald's guidance on a Necro off-tank, that means that we're missing other gear sets like Powerful Assault. So, does this mean that potentially we're going to have a healer with Powerful Assault and either Olorim or Spell Power Cure, and then the other healer would be using Roaring Opportunist and Jorvald's, and then we've got a tank, the other tank, the main tank, using the Yolnakrin with something like Elemental Catalyst or like Ebon or Worm or whatever your group needs, maybe Gallonway. I can kind of see that being a reasonably good setup, and from some of the healers that I've spoke to, combining Powerful Assault with Olorim or Spell Power Cure isn't really that much of an issue. You wouldn't really be like, there's no real leeway in terms of putting, if you put this on the main tank, they're going to have to use it with Yolnakrin. Yolnakrin is a set that you have to use on a main tank in pretty much everything, so it would be tricky fitting it in with a main tank, especially if you want to combine it with Jorvald's guidance. There are many different ways that we can use this potentially, so we're just going to have to keep testing it out. We're going to have to see how it performs in different situations and different content and in different groups. But definitely it's going to be a set that's probably going to be, like, if there's not too many adjustments to the set, then it would potentially get used for next patch. And it does look very promising, but I do think we are going to get a reduction of that time. I don't think there'd be no reason to reduce the number of group members or the range, but I do think it would be likely for us to see a reduction on that time. If this set does go live, obviously we'll be pretty excited about it. It will be another useful tank set, and I can see it making its way into most groups in terms of raid content, and it definitely serves a purpose for 4-man content as well, especially if you like a Necro tank in 4-man content. Being able to cast a Colossus along with that particular gear set proccing as well, that's going to be fantastic for 4-person, 4-player content. So that's everything on this Champions gear set, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.